Welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, Hillary Clinton has clinched the presumptive nomination to face off against Donald Trump this fall. But Bernie Sanders from the Democrat Party isn't ready to back down. What can we expect in the lead up to what many believe as an exciting presidential election season in the United States? And as 9.4 million Chinese students sit for Gaokao, we examine the continued significance of the test in a hyper-competitive society. And we begin today's show with the U.S. election. On June the 7th, voters will go to the polls for the Democratic primaries in 6 states, including the biggest state, California, and also New Jersey. Hillary Clinton is the presumptive nominee, but Bernie Sanders isn't ready to back down. Who will face off against likely Republican nominee Donald Trump this fall? And more importantly, who will win? Before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at this.
The race to the White House edges closer to the finish line. 4 months after the race began, the Democrats will wrap up their primary process in sunny California. But for many, Hillary Clinton has already clinched the nomination with the news that she secured the requisite number of delegates.
According to the news, we are on the brink of a historic, unprecedented moment. But we still have work to do, don't we? We have 6 elections tomorrow, and we're going to fight hard for every single vote, especially right here in California.
Whoa! But rival Bernie Sanders isn't ready to throw in the towel, noting that Hillary is dependent on superdelegates who won't vote until July's party convention.
According to the Democratic National Committee, what they should not be doing is lumping pledged delegates, i.e. real delegates, with superdelegates who may or may not change their mind, but who do not vote until July 25th. So if everybody knows exactly how all the superdelegates are going to vote on July 25th, that's great for them, but I don't know that.
Superdelegates are party insiders who can pledge their support for a candidate ahead of the convention, but don't formally vote until the convention itself. Bernie's hoping some of them will change their minds before then. In May, Donald Trump reached the number of delegates needed to secure the Republican presidential nomination. But the nominee for either party is not officially named until the party's respective conventions. If Hillary wins, she will become the first female nominee for a major U.S. political party. If this election has proved anything, what this election has proved is that anything could happen.
And for more on the U.S. presidential election and the many twists before that, we are joined here in Beijing, Ye Hailin, researcher from the National Institute of International Strategy, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome, sir. Meanwhile, joining us from Chicago, we have Laura Schwartz, who is a speaker and also author and commentator. She used to work for the Clinton administration as the White House Director of Events. Welcome as well. Great to have you again. And also in Washington, D.C., we are having Brandon Andrews, former Senate staffer and the Republican Party strategist. Well, for the 3 of you, this is going to be a big day for the U.S. when it comes to both parties. Laura, your prediction about Ms. Clinton's fate this time in the 6 states?
Well, I think she'll perform very well in New Jersey. You know, she's already over the top and is the presumptive nominee of the party at this point. But they want today to be a big voter turnout day because that news came a little bit earlier than thought, and tonight was going to be the big party. I think it still will be. And I think it's interesting to reflect that 8 years ago to the day, today, that Hillary Clinton pulled out of her presidential primary campaign and gave it to President Obama, who is ahead in the pledged delegate votes. And here we are today, 8 years later. Hillary Clinton is ahead of the pledged delegates votes. She's ahead by the superdelegate vote. She's ahead by the popular vote. So I don't think Bernie will call it quits today. He's giving a lot of indications that he will not. But it is just mathematically insurmountable
Yeah.
for him to get the nomination. And your wonderful reporter was just giving a very good analysis about these super delegates, these delegates that for the last 30 years, this is nothing new at all. Super delegates are members of the Democratic Party that have the opportunity to vote for a candidate. Now, those super delegates are past U.S. presidents. They are leadership of the Democratic National Committee.
All right.
But I will tell you this, Mies Tianwei, they have never, ever, ever decided the fate of an election. The superdelegates have gone with whoever won the most pledged delegates of the people.
Okay.
So right now with Mr. Sanders wanting to flip that around, that goes against everything he believes in and anything that has
All right.
ever happened before. I see Hillary Clinton coming out as the winner.
I can feel a lot of enthusiasm coming from you, Ms. Schwartz, when talking about the votes of the voters vis-a-vis the superdelegates. We talk about superdelegates. Hillary Clinton has already obtained the prerequisite number of delegates needed to clinch the Democratic nomination for president. But Bernie Sanders, as you said, is vowing to continue his fight for the nomination. His argument is that much of Clinton's lead is based on the support of superdelegates who will not actually vote until the convention of the party. According to CNN, Clinton has already secured 1,812 pledged delegates and 572 superdelegates for a total of 2,384 delegates. What's a lot of math going on over there? One more than needed for the nomination. Sanders, on the other hand, has secured 1,521 pledged delegates, only 47 super delegates. As you explained, the super delegate is a delegate to the Democratic National Convention who can choose their selection for the voting rather than the results of their state determining their vote. A super delegate could potentially swing the votes to nominate a presidential candidate, receive the majority of the votes during the primary. That's, of course, a very interesting complications of the American politics. Having said that, though, Ms. Schwartz, these polls, of course, could be quite reliable, as we have already coming from various polls indicating the same direction. And yet, Ms. Schwartz, this is what I want to ask you. You're an expert. What would these polls have on the voters' actions? Well, voters saw almost similar results coming from every poll. Would they be still geared up to go to the polls and vote for their party's party's nomination?
Well, I think there are a couple of things at play. If Bernie Sanders continues with the argument that the superdelegates should decide the nominee of this party, I think a lot of people will stay home in November on the actual election day. Because again, as I mentioned, that's never happened before. Delegates have overturned the will of the pledged delegates' popular vote. Now, in the polls, you have got to make a great effort on both sides of the aisle from the same party after a primary concludes. Hillary Clinton, as tough as it was for her to do after working so hard, put all of her weight and support behind President Obama, then Senator Obama.
Well,
she did everything to get
let's talk about this election rather than the last election. Even though she's a comrade Lei Feng, you could even term that, with using a Chinese terminology, by the way. Well, she has to fight her way this time because nobody is going to use her achievement last time in order to prove that she is the candidate this time. So let me ask you very briefly. Will that influence the action of the voters? Let's just say for the other 6 states who are supposed to have the eventual numbers out very soon. That's first question. Second question is, what will happen? Mr. Sanders, 70% of the superdelegates he has to achieve in order to turn the pictures around. Is that likely to happen? 2 questions. Please, direct answers.
Yep. Number one, the numbers never should have come out tonight because both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders want huge turnouts today in all of those 6 states. They are urging them as of last night through today. I urge them, get out and vote. Bring a sister, bring a brother, bring a family member because your vote still counts. You know, we want to show in the Democratic Party that there is a margin of enthusiasm, that people believe it's important to vote. So that is very important for today, no matter what the delegate count is then. again. Afterwards, Bernie Sanders has to go. He said already he's going to take a break, go to Vermont. He needs to decide what he's going to do. He needs to decide and realize that the differences between a Donald Trump administration and a Hillary Clinton administration are far more greater than any differences between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders.
Well, he would also love to imagine it could be a Sanders administration vis-a-vis a Donald Trump administration. Let me go to you, Mr. Andrews. The Republican Party is very interesting as well. Party unity, is it really there, or it is really just verbally out there?
Well, the reality is that Donald Trump had an incredible opportunity to unite the party in advance of the party convention in July. Of course, I think many people know that Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, came out and endorsed Mr. Trump along with other quote-unquote establishment members of the party. However, Mr. Trump made a racist statement last week about a judge in Indiana of Hispanic heritage, and that I think has caused a really significant rift in the party, and I think you're going to see a lot of, again, more establishment Republicans that already hold federal office not only shy away from Donald Trump, but perhaps even go back on their previous endorsement of him. He cannot continue to make these types of statements. It's not what the Republican Party stands for.
Right.
And unfortunately, Donald Trump is, of course, his own person, and he's going to. However, these blows are very significant, and when you want to talk about party unity, it's impossible if Donald Trump continues on this. But
Mr. Andrews, you could see that Mr. Donald Trump, at this moment at least, is not in any way apologetic about his earlier statements about when it comes to races and also other nationalities, immigrants as well. You see people, establishment so-called, try to distance themselves rather, even under the banner of party unity at this moment. Paul Ryan, for example, he has to come up with his own terminology and also way of portraying his opinions now when it comes to states elections. You also have Mitch McConnell, who at the very beginning was standing with Donald Trump. Now he's trying to distance himself even a little bit more. And also Marco Rubio as well. He pledged to support Donald Trump party unity, but it seems it's a different thing between words and action. So with a quote-unquote united Republican Party, at least for the moment, what would that mean for the chances of Donald Trump vis-a-vis the whoever is the candidate coming from the Democrat Party?
Well, I think if Donald Trump continues to create issues for Republicans that are running down the ballot, so for state office, for other federal offices during the 2016 election cycle, in terms of getting more support, is going to be very difficult. I think today you spoke about the primary out in California. However, there's primaries happening in 6 states, including North Carolina, where Renee Elmers, who's actually the first member of Congress that Donald Trump has endorsed, he actually did a robocall for her just a couple of days ago. And actually Bernie Sanders has a supporter that's running for Congress in New Jersey. If Donald Trump can prove that he can continue on his current course and support candidates and ensure that candidates win, then he's going to have an opportunity to, just practically speaking, keep the party united, because people are going to be able to win. However, if polls show that Republican candidates down the ballot aren't able to win because of these incredibly racist and derogatory statements that Donald Trump is making, then no, the unity won't be there, and his chances of winning in November, the chances of the party keeping Congress, the chances of the party moving forward in November are going to be fairly grave.
We are going to let both of you, coming from very different party backgrounds, commenting about each other's situation a little bit later. For now, let me come to you, Mr. Ye, here in Beijing. You listened to the other two wonderful panelists' comments, and certainly they are following the party line, but at the same time, very realistically helping us to understand the very complicated American politics. So, Mr. Ye, what do you make of this? Is this a very unique phenomenon this time? It's more personality rather than anything this time.
It's not only the phenomenon, it's also changed the theory of the political science. You know, usually when
You think so?
the party election, the theory about the party election basically means if you have the multiple candidates, more than two, and the candidate has to pick up his different policy approach to attract the guy who has a strong approach to her or his policy. That means you have to be different. So you get your own people and stand for you. But if there's only two candidates in the two-party system, you have to go into the between. Because no matter what's your stance, your people will always stand for you. And your job is try to get the people from the between. And then you will win. But Donald Trump, they changed everything because he now already in the two-party campaign, but he will still hold a very strong approach on and a strong personality. I think the unity of the party, especially for the Republicans, is very important. But for Donald Trump, I think he still will prefer his strong personality.
This is also a choice between one who is extremely experienced in international relations, Secretary Clinton, of course, is the one that we're talking about, and the other is not necessarily in any way being close to politics, but rather a pop star almost in a way, plus businessman. So what do you make of these choices? What would that mean for people outside the United States, even though we don't vote, but still we could have an opinion?
I think firstly, Americans aligned may prefer Hillary Clinton because she won't change this policy principle as a policy fundamentally. But Donald Trump will open the new gate for the whole world because Donald Trump really noticed that the long-term American foreign policy approach has a very essential problem.
Very interesting. Well, you are putting a lot of sensible logics behind Mr. Trump's argument. We'll see whether that's really the case or not. Let me come back to you.
And then again, there's Donald Trump who wants to give nuclear weapons to other rogue nations, and that really is not sound foreign policy.
But you know, Mr. Andrews, some would argue he's trying to show his personality to our voters and also the media airtime. And when it comes to his term in the office, things could be different. Is that really likely to be the case, for according to you, the Republican strategist?
Well, one thing
Well, do you
is
think
clear.
you should
If
believe what your
there's anything
candidate says when
positive-
they say something as rogue and dangerous as supplying Europe and Asia with nuclear weapons? I think that is a cause for pause.
Okay, Mr. Andrews, your turn.
One thing is clear, and if there's anything positive that's come out of this, it's that this election cycle, Republicans have superseded any previous numbers in terms of voter turnout. Now, there's reasons why voters have turned out for Donald Trump, and I think that's something that the Republican Party certainly has to address. However, if there's one good thing, one positive thing for the party that's come out, it's the turnout that's been there. And of course, statements that are made that are egregious or ridiculous or impractical are not things that we can accept as a party or as you know, someone who's running for president to lower state.
Yeah. What about Mr. Waltz? It seems that the anti-Clinton machine has been running for quite a few decades because she has been a public figure for so many years. But will she be able to function against this huge machine, whether the arguments are true or not, this time during the election? Last time, at least, she failed.
As far as running it against the machine, I mean, I think her campaign has a very sound strategy when it comes to media messaging, the money that you need to get your messaging out. I think that she is very qualified to serve on day one, and that it's not just extending the Obama's policies, but it's taking the policies that have worked, like affordable health care, covering over 29 million new people, but let's make it better and let's make it different. So I think she should focus, and she has been, on the change factor being that, okay, let's look at what's good, now let's make it better. And I think that's where the country wants to go. You have either an optimism or pessimism. And I have to tell you, with these racist remarks over the last week and with just the downward spiral, it just really saddens me because I love the American people. It is awesome to get different
we're running out of
attitudes.
We're running out of time. We'll have another time
tough.
maybe for you to take advantage to fight against the Republican candidate. But for now, let me go to you, Mr. Ye, for the final words.
Hey, but I'm all for the process.
I can tell over there. Well, but final words from you, Mr. Ye. What exactly do you think is the essence of observation that we should have running up to the national election that we are seeing?
This is very interesting. It's more exciting than the House of Cards. But after all, I should notice that it's the election about personality, it's not a policy.
Well, we'll see. Laura Schwartz, Brandon Andrews, and Ye Hailin, thank you so much for the three of you for being with us. We're looking forward to many of those political fights ahead. Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. Fewer students are opting to take China's once all-important Gaokao exams. Could an educational sea change be approaching? You're watching World Insight. Welcome back. A big day for Chinese high school students as China's National College Entrance Exam, or Gaokao, begins. Around 9.4 million students are sitting the grueling 2- or 3-day exam, which aims to screen and select candidates for higher education. For many Chinese students, it's a make or break opportunity that could shape the rest of their lives. But Gaokao these days continues to draw criticism for placing immense pressure on students and arguably advantaging some students over the others. Is the system due for an overhaul? Before we go to our discussion, let's take a look at this.
Annual Gaokao season. Starting today, some 9.4 million Chinese students are sitting the 2-day college entrance examination, also known as Gaokao. Most universities in China evaluate potential students based entirely on their performance on this once-in-a-lifetime standardized exam. The test has received its fair share of criticism for placing incredible pressure on Chinese students.
The Gaokao system in China is changing. It's changing. I witnessed the change in the past 20 or 30 years. It's changing from, more what we said is rigid to the more flexible system. This is only one track for millions of the students to go.
In 2014, the Chinese State Council released guidelines for Gaokao reform, which provinces are expected to implement in 2017. Some of those changes are already evident in places like Guangdong province, which is now allowing an expanded 9,000 migrant students in the area to sit for the exam. Previously, students had to return to their home provinces to take the Gaokao. As the major universities tend to favor local applicants, this system has disadvantaged migrant students from other regions.
I've been living and studying here for 10 years. If I had to take the exam back in my hometown, it would take me some time to adapt to the new surrounding, and it could affect my studies.
Critics also argue that the distribution of education resources has long been unfairly balanced in China between East and West, rural and urban. In Shanghai, Fudan University has implemented a new quota for students from rural areas under a Ministry of Education program. Roughly 60,000 top rural students nationwide will benefit from the program this year.
The gap in education is quite big between rural areas and cities, not only in the teaching quality, but also people's attitudes and atmosphere in schools. Many people think study is useless, and I saw some of my classmates dropping out even after middle school.
Applications to foreign universities are increasing among high school students. It offers another track for students that allows them to bypass the Gaokao entirely. Some say this leaves them more time to develop skills beyond the classroom.
And they're much more willing to take the time to stop and think about what they want to do, what their answer might be, what their answer could be. So they're much more inquisitive and willing to think for themselves. They have a stronger desire to be more independent thinkers.
As China undergoes a domestic transformation, President Xi Jinping has noted that a person's value lies in his or her abilities, not necessarily in acceptance to a top university.
And for more discussion about China's college entrance exam, or Gaokao, I'm joined here in the Beijing studio. Mr. Teng Jimeng, Professor Teng, is coming from the American Studies Center at Beijing Foreign Studies University. Hello. Meanwhile, joining us from Chicago, we have Dali Yang, Professor from the Department of Political Science at the University of Chicago. In Tokyo, we are having Mr. William Saito, who is a special advisor to the Japanese cabinet and also founder of Intercur, an international technology consulting firm. Gentlemen, welcome to the three of you. You are the survivors, aren't you, of your own versions of national college entrance examination. Professor Yang, what's it like to be a survivor?
Well, I think actually I took the Gaokao in 1979, and in China, of course, at that point the competition was much more fierce. And of course, only about 3% of those people who took the exams got into college. But at the same time, there were many more opportunities. China was just opening up. The economy was changing. So as a result, actually, there were just an incredible amount of opportunities for anyone who goes through the system. Today, however, there is practically mass public higher education. As a result, of course, the competition in the workplace is much more fierce.
All right. 75% of those exam sitters will be eventually enrolled in the universities, whether it's great university or you say mediocre universities, whatever. But the thing is the system still maintaining its significance? When you look at the numbers, at the time it was 3% at the very beginning, now it's 75%. And also, is the system the kind of system that we need today in order to encourage young people to study and study in the right direction?
I think that the system is way outdated. I think that we need to update and reform the system. If you look at the system 30 years ago, basically it was a system that screened for the best and the brightest so that we can select this very highly selected pool of people who can join, for example, the officialdom.
It's the top of the cream.
It's the cream of the crop,
right,
in that sense. And so in this sense, the system worked then, but the system doesn't seem to work now.
But you could also argue it's providing a massive opportunity for, just the public to get further education into the universities. Why not?
Well, absolutely. See, back then it was only one examination. Now we have one examination that allow you to be taken, admitted by multiple universities, institutions. So that means there are multiple paths now available for college, for a high school graduate right now. You can attend a 2-year program school, a 3-year program, and also vocational universities in this very particular sense. And so I think that we survived, but then we may not necessarily end up in the best job we can. And nowadays, look at these kids. I mean, they actually can join not just the academic world, but also in terms of the workforce, the main workforce. Now, so
you're for this or not for this? I'm confused, Professor Teng. You're always sitting on the fence, or what is this about? Exactly, what do you mean?
Well, what I mean is that there are multiple options right now. The examination provide the chance, but then outside the examination, there are multiple opportunities for them not to pass. I mean, even if they don't pass,
yes,
they can
indeed.
survive.
Yes, indeed. But this is still the mainstream. The mainstream take this opportunity and try to get the best they can out of the system. Mr. Saito, of course, in Japan there is a similar system. It is also true, let's just say, in South Korea as well, China's Taiwan as well. What is going on with the Asian educational system? It seems that we subscribe to the very similar systems compared to the others.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense. The system in Taiwan, China, Korea, and Japan were all originating from China and the system of bureaucracy, which was also invented in China. And how you best and the brightest. Obviously, when you had a number of people and you wanted the best people in these limited resources, it made sense. There was a time and place for that. But for me, this is actually a personal issue. I actually sit on the Central Planning Commission for the Ministry of Education in Japan. And my problem is that if you could if you could actually change a problem into some sort of test, it really makes it amenable to computers and machine learning and AI taking these things over. And so why compete with computers? That when you get into society where you get so optimized and so competitive to be able to memorize and take tests, at the end of the day, you're competing with computers, and I don't think that's very effective. And you know, I see a world here today where today's elementary school kids, 65% of them will not have jobs because they will have changed. And so the system, while it might have been beneficial in a time and a place, is definitely not useful when we have to bring out the humanness and the creativity.
Okay, I think this has a lot to do with not just the exam itself, but also what university should be about. The nature and the eventual goal of university education, because all of these kids eventually get into university. So should that be the eventual goal? Cultivate talents that's going to be innovative and creative. Or should that be that the eternal goal is cultivate talents that eventually will have a job after they graduate from university? Or the third goal is, whatever it is, let's just have them go through university education. We provide equality for everybody. So it seems that there are very diverse goals. Can you criticize the college entrance examination for an eventual goal that we should have in mind when it comes to university education? These are two very different things, Mr. Saido.
Yeah, no, and you bring up a very good point. I think the point of university is to create and expand knowledge. What we want to do is measure the aptitude of someone's ability to be able to problem solve and be creative about this.
Right.
That, as you've pointed out, innovation is going to be very critical in the near future. And so we can't have a bunch of great test takers that can memorize. We need to have people who can actually problem solve and think outside the box in creativity. And I don't think that test taking in this day and age is the best method to measure this. And so it becomes dangerous when the world is changing and we have to measure for different skills.
Yeah, but Professor Yang, what do you think should be the college entrance examination, the system itself, be blamed for not cultivating enough innovative talents in China?
Well, first of all, the education system is designed to nurture talent in multiple ways. We are not just looking for one kind of person. Every society needs many different kinds of people. There are the creative talent. There are people who do the day-to-day routines, and of course sometimes working on the assembly line. So in fact, as a result, every education system has actually multiple kinds of institutions, including elite research universities and also others that are more vocational schools. In terms of the exam system, my sense is that in fact, especially in the Asian setting, you do need a screening mechanism, but including actually in every country today, you do also have a screening system. The issue is what is being screened for. I think actually the gentleman from Japan is emphasizing that some of the tests may not be adaptive to the needs of today. But in fact, that means that you need to change the way that the tests are taken. In the Chinese case, I want to emphasize, it remains the most the fairest system that there is actually in Chinese society. So in that sense, actually, the issue is how to adapt it, to adjust it. For example, what subjects needs to be tested, how the tests are being taken, and of course, what other criteria can you consider? I think one of the big issues that has happened in China in recent years is that increasingly there are many other adjustments that were being made to the grades, to the scores of the students. As a result, increasingly people felt that the system had become unfair. It's not about the test per se. In fact, the parents want to have a level playing field for all the test takers. But at the same time, we do need to adjust the tests in a way to adapt to the different system. But I think it's also a good thing that students today also have other opportunities, including studying abroad as well.
Well, abroad is not an escape. Eventually, they're going to once again face the job market competition and many of the problems they would face once they come out of a domestic university as well. So let me come back to you, Professor Tong. So what is it? Is it, as Professor Yang just indicated, people have been putting a lot of criticism on the college entrance examination itself. yet they did not necessarily eventually realize is the overall education's problem that has caused all these pressures on these young people. They blame the education, the entrance examination alone, and yet without noticing the mountains have a lot of problems and stones to deal with.
Well, once again, I would echo Professor Young's, elaboration. I think that it is not the examination that is to blame. I think the system structurally is designed to screen for the so-called best and brightest through a very rigid and inflexible examination system. And that system, in fact, prevents us from getting the best and the brightest.
But some would argue, Professor Deng, you know this better than I do. I mean, every year you welcome the new students onto your campus. They are really the brightest because you are coming from one of the most renowned Chinese universities here. But having said that, though, some have been talking about college entrance examination as the very, one of the very basic testing grounds for a percentage of students to shine over the others. After all, you got 9.4 million this year alone. So it's one layer after another of testing and also opportunities sought for these students over the years. Eventually, only very few could make it to the top, as you said, the innovative talents. So is this what we are having right now? We are having the very basic outlining of the talents, and these talents eventually will go to even more fearful competition later during the university and later in their academic life in order to be the best ones.
And so that's one of my
It is very different from the other country where there's not as many a population base as China is.
And absolutely, I mean, that's one of my major concerns. See Chinese higher education, especially higher education, that is now so very kind of centralized and eliticized. I mean, you see this group of kids coming across the country, only representing a teeny tiny minority of the larger graduating population from high school. Look at this 9 million graduates. I mean, take the examination, only 10% of them almost. I mean, more than 10%, only more than 10% of them will be getting into these best universities. And so leaving a large crowd behind.
Well, I'm not sure whether the number you give is exactly correct, so let me go to some of the numbers with you, especially for our international audience. In recent years, colleges are taking in more students than before, Professor.
Right.
So now, every 2 in 5 Chinese aged between 18 and 22 are college students. 3 out of 4 students will be able to be enrolled in colleges and universities. 3 out of 4, let's say.
But not
and
the best,
that means 75% of all the exam sitters, as we mentioned earlier, will have a seat in the college. So it's actually quite a big base. If you are saying this competition is killing the fun for a lot of kids to study further, many would disagree. It's a huge base we're talking about that will be enrolled eventually into university. But the question, once again, is what is the nature of a university? And after taking this exam, where are the students going? Mr. Saito, once again, what would make our exam system helping to really cultivate innovation as students? How can we change the system? I mean, this is such a sensitive area. One little change would cause a huge social stir.
Yeah, and so I think the two other speakers, the main point here that people seem to be over disagreement is the fairness aspect of this and allowing people to take the tests from different regions of China and having that same opportunity. Now, assuming that my problem here is the next part, where is the flip side, that when you have a testing system like this, and actually when you make it too fair, the problem is when you bin the students and they go to their respective universities according to their test-taking skills, what this then eventually creates in the end result is that you have too many like-minded people in one institution. And so this lack of diversity, this is in a lot of Asian countries, it happens in Japan as well, is that you have lots of very good test takers in particular subject areas at a certain grade or skill level, but it doesn't add a diversity that, for example, you might have from different regions, different ethnicities, different income levels. This type of perspective and this kind of difference is actually what really motivates each other to look at things and become innovative and become hungry or become creative. And so it's this thing that I think is is the other danger of trying to level set and making things too fair. And so I don't know if that's realistic. I think that what really is important is that you see other universities and systems shine outside when they emphasize innovation is that diversity. And so when you do test taking, you actually take away from that.
Well, Professor Yang, we only have 1 minute left. What about diversity, as Mr. Saito just argued? Will that really bring the best out of the young people's minds? You also see in a lot of problematic public high schools, but that's not necessarily going to bring out the best of the talents. So will diversity really help the issue to find a result, a better result?
Well, certainly it's valuable to have people from different perspectives and backgrounds in one institution. But of course, at the same time, you have to be to make sure that those people from very diverse backgrounds also have the capabilities to excel in those institutions. And I think actually in the Chinese system, there has been some emphasis in bringing in students, especially from the inland areas to the coast. And institutions along the coast also wants to attract students from across the country. So there is this issue of finding the right balance, admitting students from locally, but at the same time also from other parts of the country and also from the world, in fact.
Yeah, it's such a complicated issue. We only debated such a small corner of the overall huge amount. I'm sure there are many other opportunities to go. We hope we'll find our solutions. Thank you so much, Teng Jimeng, Dali Yang, and William Saito. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. That is also time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You will be able to find out our program. And also you can check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.